Today, I'm going to be changing the strings on this guitar. I made it 3 gigs and ended up busting my D string, which is a new one for me, so I'm definitely going to change it before tomorrow. So here we go. Lately, I have been into the Elixir strings, the nano webs. I've seen more and more players switching back to Elixirs, and I took the opportunity to do so myself because I got sent a free set a while back. So I just threw them on to check it out, and it turned out I loved having a little bit more of a smooth feel on the strings, less fret noise, string noise on the frets, and as I'm sliding back and forth, particularly if you're going to be recording, it does help. So anyway, I'm gonna get into it. I'm gonna be putting the phosphor bronze on. I use lights on this guitar. Take off the old strings. I'm gonna show you the products I'm using. I'm gonna actually use my drill here. I have found, by the way, if you use a drill, I would use the Music Nomad attachment drill bit, and then I would set your drill with the lowest possible setting. That way, if you get twisted or something's weird, it should slow down for you. Anyway, here we go. These aren't too terribly complicated to pull off. To pop out the bridge pins, I use one of these Music Nomad bridge pin pullers. They're really good because they don't damage. In fact, if I look closely on my bridge here, I can see from the former Nate trying to pull these pins off with alternate methods, and I kind of made some dents and scratches. This, most of the time with most acoustic guitars, is not going to cause any damage, and it's going to get them up real quick. Boom. Pull the broken string out. Boom. All right, set those to the side. Pull out the strings. I take the strings here and I wrap it in a circle and sort of twist it around the circle so that everything stays together. I don't want to lose any of this mess as I go to throw it away. I'm going to set it to the side. Here's the broken string, what's left of it anyway. 2 things I want to think about as I go to put on the new strings is what condition is my guitar in right now? This is a matte guitar. The little drops of sweat, it sounds bad, but like it sort of gets absorbed, so it's not gonna have these big dots on it. But I have found this guitar detailer you have to be careful with on matte finish guitars. On this one, however, it does say for matte and gloss finishes. I have a bunch of these cloths and I've actually wrote an M for matte on this one so that I know I use no waxes of any kind. It's just a detailer that just sort of mostly cleans. I think most people would probably say to spray the cloth first and do what you feel is best and what the manufacturer says for sure. But what I have found actually is just kind of giving it a light layer on the face of the guitar here. Doing my best not to spray directly in here is probably be okay, but I don't want to damage any of the electronic components. And then without letting it sit too long, giving it a good wipe down, you're going to see the moisture on top as I make this first pass. But what I think though is if there's not any moisture, I feel like it's not going to clean up that well. You know, it's like you need something to be a cleaning agent in this. And I think the moisture does help without overdoing it. Flip it over to a dry side, keep buffing it off. Again, I'm not looking for perfection. I've played and gigged this guitar hundreds of times. I think I might be coming up to 1,000 times with this specific guitar. But I do believe in taking care of the instruments that you want to keep for a long time. It's one of the reasons why I think I've been able to gig with this guitar for so long is because I always try to take the time to keep it clean and make sure everything's working out okay. I will take whatever residual is left on the cloth and wipe underneath. As this gunk builds up, I'll take more time. So the next thing I'm gonna do, is I didn't have this out before, is I take the finest possible steel wool you can get and I grab a little chunk of it. Another Music Nomad product by, it's called F1, Fretboard F1 oil. Cleans, conditions, protects. What I do here is I add a dot to every fret. I do this about every other time. I take this steel wool. Don't get super gritty steel wool, you'll ruin your fretboard. But you can, with just a little bit of pressure, start to make your way down. I start with circles just to spread it out a little bit. Now that it's spread out a little bit, I can come through and give it a good back and forth. Again, people have their ways of doing things, and I'm happy to be corrected. I'm sure somebody will. And what I will do, if I can see some buildup on this right next to the frets, is I'll take my fingernail and sort of push it so that it gets in between there. and rubs up against. I can already see some dents forming. I've had this guitar refretted one time, I believe up to the 14th fret, which worked out really well. Shout out to Hugh at 13th Street Guitars when I lived in Orange County, who has a Plek machine and knows how to use it. I also learned to let this sit for a few minutes, and as that's sitting, it doesn't mean I need to be sitting. I can keep working on the next thing, which is to open up my pack here and get out a set of strings. That's a 3-pack. So I do have the strings already pulled out that I need. Although, do I? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I do. Oh, before I forget, one last thing called the crescent wrench. 10mm wrench that has this end on it. And what you want to do is every once in a while, you'll notice we'll get loose here. And so I saw that a Taylor guy once upon a time when they get guitars in for repair. The important thing is you're probably not ever going to change these nuts on top. So not to turn it before you get a secure fitting there. And if it's not budging, just leave it alone, you know. But I just notice every once in a while, I'll get a little loose, and you don't need too much pressure. Right now, I think we're okay. None of these are really moving much. So I just like to show, oh, that one nudged a little bit. I just like to show, in case you haven't done that in a while, you might notice that these get loose and it could cause problems in the future. Okay, if you ever have tuning problems or you hear your strings making noise as you're trying to tune, and you tune the tuning pegs and it's just like not slipping, it's like gripping and nothing seems to be happening on the tuner, and then all of a sudden a big jump. It might be because you're getting some stickiness here on the nut or the bridge, or the saddle, I should say. And so if I add just a dot to the bottom of this nut here, not much at all. And the reason I'm adding it just to the bottom is because as the strings slide through, I notice that it most of the time sort of just drags it through that nut. Another place, I'll just add a little dab here on the saddle where I can see the string indents. Again, I'm just looking for a little bit of a slick surface as these strings slide across, so when you do tune, the strings are not being gripped in any way. With the Big Bends, you get a couple of these tiny brushes, and it's probably going to be hard to even see the tip of this thing. But essentially, what it does is it helps you spread it and make sure it kind of gets in there. Again, I don't need to go across the whole thing. And as we get it in there, I just make sure it gets painted on. When you do, I might do another one for my electric guitar. And this is also great to add if you have like a Strat. In fact, I have mine right here. If you have a Strat and you're loading in your strings, before you slide your strings all the way in, just giving a little bit right here. Because sometimes if you haven't changed your strings in a while, pulling the strings out of the back, if you have back plate like that, it gets really stuck because of the tension, especially if you don't change your strings all that often. And so that just helps. It's just a little investment into your future. Okay, I have a different cloth set aside for wiping this down. Sometimes if it's especially dirty, I'll use a paper towel to get up some of the initial dirt, but I'm just gonna use a separate cloth here to start wiping it off, the excess, now that I've given it a few minutes to soak in. Okay, that's enough. I can leave a little bit on there. Now I'm gonna start feeding the strings into the bridge here. Getting my E out here, my high E. I like to place it on top and then push it down with the pin, which is something you'll hear on a lot of guitar string videos. And I think it's important because if you don't do that, what happens a lot of the time is as you're tuning up, you'll see a big slip happen. And I think what's happening is if you're inside the guitar like this, and then you tune up, and then it slips and comes up back to where it should be in the pin, you're just trying to avoid unnecessary wrapping and, I don't know, just getting a more secure fit. All right, onto the G here. Again, just making sure these bridge pins are doing the work of pushing the string into the hole there. It will save you in the future. As I'm putting them in, I push the strings over to the side, get them out of the way, and then I'm gonna remember to flip the drill the other direction, to spin the other direction as I'm putting this on. All right, last low E string here. Everybody does this different. I'm just telling you what I do. I'm not being prescriptive, I'm being descriptive, okay? You actually put your drill in reverse, by the way, for me anyway, when you're doing this, if you're gonna use a drill bit. I used to cut my strings before putting them in, and it worked out okay for a long time, except one time I cut it a little short, and as it was wrapping, I didn't stick it in enough, and it started to slip out. And so now what I do is I stick it through, and it adds a little of annoyance, you'll see, but it's a much safer way to go about it, because I don't want to have to do this all over again unnecessarily. But basically what I do is I pull it, or I push it through the hole, and I pull it tight here. And what I'll do is I will grab, you can pick any fret, but you know, one of these first couple of frets here, and what I'll do is I'll pull it back 1 fret, all right? As I pull it back 1 fret, that should give me enough room to wrap. It will help if you put a bend in the string, and no matter what string you're doing, just bend it towards the middle. So if you're over here, bend this top of the string in, bend this top of the string in. And then if you want to get crazy, you can take this string out and create sort of like an S pattern. So you definitely want to put a bend here, and even better is put a bend down here. And if you get real good, you can just use one hand to kind of give it a twist. Now I'm getting my drill, I'm holding it so it doesn't slip out. I'm gonna get out of the way as much as I can. But as this turns, this S is holding the string in place as it's making its way around. So what I do, before I get too far here, is I like to do 1 wrap on top of the string coming out, and then every other wrap below. I do think it does hold the string in place a little bit. So there's our 1 wrap on top. And now I'm gonna come down below. Now that we have 1 wrap, I can kind of give this a more aggressive bend up, and then I'm coming around. Bend it up again. I'm going a little slower than if I'm not. People that make videos know everything takes a little longer when you're trying to film it. Now here's something that happens, is your bridge pin might start to come up. So okay. Give it another push down. We'll be okay. Okay, that's close enough. If you have wire cutters, use wire cutters. This is a manual wind from Planet Waves that has a little easy, safe string clipper on here that I've always just kept around. This little tool, I think I have 4 of them. I keep them in every guitar case in case I need to change a string while at a gig, which I had to do a few months ago. And it's just a quick way to just wrap it around, give it a cut, and you're off to the races. Also has a bridge pin puller, which works okay. Again, not as good as this, but it's okay. Okay, basically rinse and repeat for these other strings. Get the hole lined up, going straight up and down. It'll help save you and keep you on track here. Everything's lined up, pull it back 1. We're bending it to the middle. Might give it an S curve if you're feeling crazy, and get going. Some people like tie it, and I applaud your effort. And but I'm looking for a combination of locking the string in, but not making it too crazy when I go to take the string off, because if you tie it, I have just seen and found it just is annoying taking this, when you want to take this string off, you have to fidget with it too much, and then you avoid changing your strings just because of the headache it's gonna cause. Zoop. Okay, close enough. Give it a clip so it's out of the way. Okay, all the strings are on, nothing is in tune. Now is a super important part, which is if you want these to be in tune and stay in tune for a gig anytime soon, you're gonna have to stretch the strings, okay? And everybody has a way. I actually bought a tool that helps me do that. This is like a luthier tool that basically you can hook on the string. And if your fingers get busted up doing this, maybe this helps, you know? I just found it wasn't really saving me time or helping my fingers. So what I do is I pull down 12, 14, 15 fret, and I put my thumb down gently. You don't want to push too hard on the front of the guitar, but give it some pull here. Make sure to push here on the headstock. This is, by the way, before I'm even tuning it up. This is just the way I do it, because the strings are still going to stretch whether they're in tune or not. So I'm going to give it its first initial stretch, tune it up, first initial stretch, tune it up. I usually use my phone to tune my guitar, in all honesty, when I'm changing strings anyway. But right now, since my phone is recording, I just have a Boss tuner over here. Get close, because it's going to come all the way out when you stretch it again. Okay, stretch again. Usually I'm coming through 3 times. You want to pull enough to give it a stretch, but not so much that you're going to break the string. So find where it's naturally stopping you and just barely go beyond that. Make sure to hold down over on this side so you're not yanking it out of the nut there. Okay, stretch it a couple more times and you're set. Have a good day.